Confidence is a key ingredient in any economic success story, and right now, it's draining away from China.
For decades, China moved like a tide that couldn't be stopped, pouring concrete across continents, swelling its cities, and pulling half the world into its orbit. But now, behind shuttered banks and shrinking families, a quieter truth is surfacing. Cracks didn't start at the edges, they began at the very core. The illusion of an unstoppable rise. It began with a promise that felt unshakable. China would not just rise, it would redefine the very shape of global power. Factory floors churned day and night. Skylines erupted in glass and steel. And with the launch of the Belt and Road Initiative, Beijing wasn't just exporting goods, it was exporting an empire. By 2015, headlines across the globe declared the Chinese century had arrived. Ports were leased in Africa, highways paved in Pakistan, and power grids rewired from Hungary to Sri Lanka. It looked like the world was becoming Chinese. But beneath the pageantry, the machinery of this miracle was built on fragile parts: phantom growth, misallocated capital, and blind faith in scale. Projects celebrated as diplomatic triumphs quickly became case studies in dysfunction. Kenya's billion-dollar railway ended in the bush. Sri Lanka's Hambantota port became a cautionary tale, handed over to Beijing when debts couldn't be paid. In Malaysia, inflated budgets and political scandal forced costly renegotiations. These were not isolated glitches. They were symptoms of a deeper fragility masked by spectacle. The world saw blueprints and contracts. What it didn't see were the unpaid bills, over-leveraged banks, and the mounting fear inside Chinese boardrooms that the growth engine might be running on fumes. By the time Italy became the first G7 country to back away in 2023, the illusion had already begun to flicker. China's momentum wasn't being stolen, it was evaporating from within. Cracks in the concrete. For years, China's greatest asset was thought to be its people. A population of 1.4 billion meant endless workers, unstoppable consumers, and an unbeatable edge in global competition. But when researchers examined leaked provincial records in 2022, a quieter reality emerged. China's population might be overestimated by as much as 100 million. These missing citizens were not migrants or refugees. They were statistical ghosts. Inflated numbers had been baked into official reports for decades. Local officials, rewarded for showing growth, had every incentive to keep dead people on registries, double count births, and create phantom households. The consequences, once abstract, were now unavoidable. The 2021 census, long delayed, revealed barely any population growth. Then came the historic reversal. In 2022, China's population shrank for the first time since the Mao-era famines. Births fell to just 9.56 million, a number so low it signaled not a slowdown, but a collapse. And this collapse wasn't gradual. Just 2 generations ago, Chinese families averaged 5 or 6 children. Today, that number hovers near 1. A fertility rate of 1.09, far below replacement level, means each new generation is smaller, older, and less able to sustain the last. The implications ripple through every sector. The working age population has been shrinking since 2014. By 2050, over 30% of Chinese citizens could be over 60. Pensions are underfunded, the retirement age remains low, and there is no immigration buffer to offset the decline. The demographic time bomb didn't tick, it detonated. And just as the labor force began to erode, the financial bedrock beneath it began to crack. The lie that built the future. While China's population quietly shrank, another crisis spread beneath the surface, this time in its financial bloodstream. Beyond state banks and official ledgers, an unregulated empire of shadow banking had ballooned, largely invisible to outsiders. At its peak, this parallel system held more than 7.5 trillion United States dollars in opaque obligations, more than double what Lehman Brothers had when the 2008 financial crisis erupted. The illusion of endless growth needed fuel. Real estate developers, local governments, and even ordinary savers poured money into wealth management products promising high returns with low risk. These weren't niche instruments for the elite. They were retirement plans for the Chinese middle class, widely sold through state-linked banks. But few knew where the money actually went. In late 2023, that illusion cracked wide open. Zhongzhai Enterprise Group, one of China's largest shadow banks, abruptly defaulted. Thousands of investors, many retirees, discovered their life savings were gone. Protests erupted in Beijing, but the government didn't respond with reforms. It responded with silence. Police dispersed the crowds. State media looked away. The message was chilling. Your loss is not our problem. Worse still, Zhongzhi was just one domino. Across the country, similar firms were quietly freezing redemptions, missing payments, and imploding under the weight of undisclosed liabilities. And because so many of these products were used to prop up real estate deals, the defaults fed into China's already faltering property sector, creating a feedback loop of vanishing liquidity, unfinished towers, and consumer panic. This wasn't just a financial hiccup. It was a slow-motion collapse hidden behind censored headlines and doctored statistics. And for the millions who trusted the system, the betrayal wasn't theoretical, it was personal, when growth becomes a prison. In any thriving economy, a crisis invites course correction. Leaders adjust policies, companies pivot, innovation steps in. But China's economic machine doesn't bend, it hardens. Under Xi Jinping, the Communist Party has tightened its grip so completely that flexibility itself has become a threat. At the heart of this rigidity is a fundamental bargain. The people accept limited freedoms in exchange for prosperity, but when prosperity falters, as it has, that contract collapses. And the party responds not with reform, but with repression. The centralization of power under Xi has made the system more brittle, not more efficient. Dissent is punished. Deviation is dangerous, and bad news is buried rather than solved. When youth unemployment passed 21% in mid-2023, the government didn't propose bold interventions. It deleted the data. Entire categories of economic indicators vanished from public databases, as if absence could erase anxiety. The logic seemed to be, if no one can prove we're failing, then we haven't failed. The consequences ripple far beyond statistics. The tech sector, once a symbol of China's ascent, became a target. Jack Ma, once a national icon, disappeared after criticizing regulators. His company, Ant Group, was gutted. Entire industries like private education and ride-hailing were dismantled by decree. Billions in market value vanished not because of performance, but because they grew too powerful in a system where no institution is allowed to rival the party. This isn't merely control, it's fear masquerading as governance. And as fear creeps into boardrooms and classrooms alike, something more vital than capital begins to erode: confidence. The great opt-out. If the Communist Party fears external threats, it's the internal disillusionment that should truly unsettle them. Across China, a silent protest has taken root, not in the form of slogans or marches, but in the stillness of resignation. Millions of young people are quietly checking out. The movements have names: Tongping, meaning lie flat, and Bailan, or let it rot. They're not organized campaigns, they're emotional verdicts. Faced with unaffordable housing, soaring education costs, and a bleak job market, young Chinese are choosing not to chase the life they were promised. Marriage rates are plummeting, birth rates have collapsed, and ambition, once the engine of China's growth, is being quietly buried under layers of exhaustion and cynicism. Graduates now flood the civil service exams, not out of patriotic duty, but out of desperation. In 2023, over 7 million people applied for fewer than 300,000 government positions, many offering modest pay and limited upward mobility. It's not opportunity they seek, it's survival. Meanwhile, the country's most talented minds are looking outward. Students pursue degrees abroad and don't return. Wealthier families are buying overseas property, securing second passports, and moving their money into safer jurisdictions. Cities like Vancouver, Sydney, and Singapore are seeing steady inflows of Chinese capital, silent signals of people preparing for an exit. Even within China, private sector layoffs, especially in tech and real estate, have decimated trust in the dream of upward mobility. Innovation is no longer rewarded, it's feared. In a system where prosperity is tied to obedience, creativity itself becomes dangerous. What's emerging isn't rebellion, it's retreat. And for a country built on human capital, this quiet exodus may prove more devastating than any protest. The middle income trap with no exit. In economic development theory, there's a well-known barrier called the middle-income trap. It describes the fate of countries that escape poverty but stall before reaching high-income status. They rise quickly on cheap labor and rapid industrialization, but then, unable to transition into innovation-driven growth, they stagnate. China was supposed to be the exception. For years, it was assumed that its scale, planning, and ambition would propel it beyond that threshold. But now, those very strengths have become structural limits. The country has aged too fast, invested too blindly, and clamped down too hard. And the traditional levers of escape are failing. Massive infrastructure stimulus, it worked in 2008, but now, entire cities stand empty. Local governments are drowning in debt. And land sales, the primary source of municipal funding, have collapsed as the population shrinks. Cutting interest rates and issuing new credit isn't enough when consumer confidence has cratered and households are choosing to save instead of spend. Technology and automation are often held up as solutions, and China has poured billions into robotics and AI. But machines don't pay taxes or buy homes. They don't have children. They can't replace a vanishing workforce or an aging population that needs care. And immigration. Unlike Europe or North America, China has no tradition or infrastructure for large-scale immigration. Foreigners make up less than 1% of its population, and there's little political appetite to change that. These aren't just policy shortcomings, they're structural dead ends. And in a country that prizes control over flexibility, those ends are fast becoming walls. Empires don't always fall with noise. Sometimes they fade in silence. One vanished statistic, one ghost city, one generation that quietly walks away. But this story isn't over. If you want to follow the unraveling in real time, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and join us for what comes next.